Is there any, like, to put you on the spot, the worst infographic you ever seen or you ever had to make because a client forced you to?
I used to have a fail blog of infographics that people would send to me. If you're needing this for show notes or something, I'm sure I could dig that one up. But I'm sure there were even people that were just happy to get the link. It's like, you realize like we're kind of making fun of this, right? I don't want to throw shade on an individual infographic, but I've just seen so many things. And some people just take the easy way out and they just have like all these horrible template things. Why would the media cover something if there's like 5,000 copies of the same thing? That never made sense to me.
Well, maybe it's better if I ask you, if you don't want to name any specific one, maybe it's better to say what are maybe a few bullet points of what should not be an infographic,
okay,
and what definitely should be an infographic.
Sure. So I feel like everybody thinks, they're like, all right, Brian, I've got this great idea. We're going to do a roadmap of what should be. No, it's like, this has been done like 1,000 times. Please don't do this. And then they're like, okay, fine, we scrap this. Our next best idea is we're gonna have a timeline of everything. It's like, no, timelines were what you were forced to memorize when you were in school. You don't have to, no one's forcing you to do this. So when people want us to do a timeline, you could call it the history of X, and then just go through history without it being a timeline. Because a timeline might be interesting to you and your organization, but everybody else is not back in school, so why would you do that? And if anything, why wouldn't you do the history and future of something? Imagine that you were writing the textbook on whatever it is you're trying to cover, right? So you have a chance to be that textbook definition for Google and for all the things that people are searching for. So I think that those are things. I also think that a lot of people don't take seriously enough everything that happens above the fold, especially the header. We spend a tremendous amount of time thinking about and testing different titles and what's happening on that first part of it. I also think that this isn't like an official term, but we'll call it going the distance, right? So I think a lot of people, a lot of designers, a lot of content marketers, maybe they could do a nice little Instagram social card or some cute little piece for social, and they might make a nice header. But I think that if you don't make each clip, each piece of it, imagine that you sliced it up into multiple slices. If you can't make each one standalone on its own without being visually interesting, compelling, and actually have some depth and substance to it, I think you've kind of missed the point. Right, and I think that's probably some of the biggest mistakes that I do. Don't even get me started on embed codes. Oh boy.
I hear that. Oh, and how about, like, when is there a situation where it's like you see something and like these are bullet points of what would make a great infographic? Like if I have somebody watching, they have data on something, or like they're not thinking about infographics, what makes for a great infographic?
So I think a lot of where people get this wrong is we are much more about story before the data, because there is data for everything. And if data doesn't exist for whatever it is that I'm talking about, anybody could make a survey right now and get a whole bunch of people on it. And you can stack the deck and they could do lying through statistics, right? So if you wanted to talk about COVID or whatever it is, you could just poll everybody who's vaccinated and get a completely distorted opinion, or poll everybody that's not vaccinated and get a completely different opinion, right? So I think if we have truly data for everything, or we could make data for everything, or we could lie about data for everything, I think it's more important to figure out the stories that people want to read. And there's a tremendous amount of work that you could do towards that, whether it's Google Trends, all the different things that when you're Googling something, people always ask, this is amazing. Or you could literally just ask journalists or watch what the journalists are saying. Or you could, I guess you could reverse engineer success of whatever you've done or what other people have done before. If you see what people are covering, why wouldn't you hit into that? Instead of just throwing spaghetti against the wall, I think that you could reach some level of predictive certainty that people would want something by making it more interesting. And then I think a lot of data points line up onto it.
Interesting. So you're saying it's not necessarily about, you're basically saying it's about what is trending right now and what people are asking about. And if enough people are asking about that, either through Google Trends or people are searching for it, which you get information on people also ask and people search for,
right?
Then you could then backwards engineer that into be like, all right, how can we find data that fills that story, I guess.
Exactly. And if you don't have data for something, there's always narrative to it. You don't have to have data points on everything. That isn't to say that data is unimportant. Data, to truly get everybody satisfied, you really need to join the left and right sides of the brain, right? Some people are going to be more data-oriented people, but everybody thinks that they are the only people who are, visual animals. We all are. I mean, we have two eyes and we're looking at the world that way. And if I have a piece of paper over here with an article and over here I have an infographic, this is going to look more visually interesting from afar, and it's going to keep and hold your attention. The article could be good, but your eye is going to go over to the other one quickly.
For sure. So then what is the process, I guess? If somebody comes to you and say, I want an infographic, what's the steps to make it happen?
Sure. So again, it's going to be very different for a gigantic Fortune 500 that knows exactly what they want. Some people just say complete free reign. They're like, just make all your magic happen on the internet. And then there's everybody kind of in between. But let's just step through like a normal process. So first we kind of get a lay of the land of what the organization is about, what they're trying to get across to the world. And we start with ideation, where it's just that one headline, that one idea, and that's everything. Again, people go data first and they don't think about the story. So we try to figure out, what is that headline? Imagine we couldn't use an infographic at all. And all we had was me sending Barry a DM or an email that he could only read the subject line. What subject line is going to be so good that at least he'll open it and it'll get his attention? So that's where we start. Sometimes we nail it like that. The client might know it, we might know it, we might have it on a discovery call, or we might have to argue about it for a while and we'll have to go back and forth on maybe a few dozen different ideas. Just kind of depends.
But even before that, they come to you with what? Like you're saying, I want an infographic, or they're saying, why do they want an infographic? Usually they know you do infographics. They
Sure,
come to you.
different use cases. We're a startup, we need coverage, we need press.
It's all about getting publicity, getting more eyeballs.
Yeah, or maybe they have a new product, they have a new service,
But it's
they're a
eyeballs.
lead gen company, they're on page 2, they want to get to page 1. There's so many different ways. And sometimes there's a lot of people that will hire us for internal things. Maybe they're trying to appeal to a particular VC group or a government or whatever it is, or they have a gigantic organization. What if they have 30,000 people and they're trying to explain something that's secret?
Mm-hmm. So it's either eyeballs or kind of dumbing it down.
It's still eyeballs, right? At the end of the day, you're still trying to influence some group of people. It's just a question of, is it wide or is it narrow?
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's why they come to you, because
So they're coming because of this, right?
and you come up like, this is why you're
trying to
How
do.
do we sum it up in a subject line?
Exactly.
Okay. Sorry.
Yep. Hey, listen, it's important to understand because, again, so many people cut corners that there's so much more that goes into this. That's why everybody thinks that it's easy, right? SEO's easy and SEO's dead. Yeah, sure it is. I mean, okay, so once we have that idea, the seed of the idea then spreads out into the research team. So the research team does what we call the blueprint. So the blueprint is part narrative and part data and just weaving all of that together. They could take a bunch of anonymized internal data, so we do that sometimes. And sometimes there could just be a lot of external, good, high quality data that we're interlacing with all the different story points. So that's a blueprint, as if you were building a car or a house. Well, guess what? You can have a blueprint to build the pixels of what we're going to see on the internet. Okay. Then it goes to design. I find that design is so subjective, but there's also a lot of ways to do design terribly. So we try to get a sense of what's going to fit their brand if they have specific brand guidelines, but at the same time, we want it to be kind of fun and interesting enough that the media and the eyeballs and all of their readership will want to check it out. We'll typically start at kind of that header point to say, this is the design thinking that we think we understand you like. We could be very wrong quite often. We could go back and forth on that a little bit, but then we waterfall through the whole piece, and then it gets implemented and tested, because nobody likes something that doesn't show up on mobile or the other browser and all the other things that people do wrong, which could be a whole show in itself. And then we go off to the races, telling all our friends about it in the media and just different coverage and social, and dare we say, influencers.
Okay, so you really soup to nuts, meaning from the idea generation to either building the data, collecting the survey information.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even tell people that we make infographics anymore because they might think like what you thought at the beginning.
No, I didn't.
Right.
You thought I thought. I know.
Well, I mean, I know. But I'm just saying, like, there's a lot of people that are just like, they write it off because they just think that I am dumb and I don't know that there are templates on the internet that can go do this for you in 5 minutes or something. Because it's a whole production. So I just tell people that we make ideas better by making them simple, visual, and influential. I've found that that is a better way to get people to kind of understand how the different parts come together.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I find that the design is like, no matter what industry, you build websites, you build mobile apps, you do infographics, you do print work. You're right, design is completely subjective. And there's always those things like, we build this design. I'm like, oh, this client doesn't like it. I want to use it myself for my own things or for another client.
Right.
So I guess you can repurpose sometimes some themes, but usually I would think with infographics, they're pretty on target with the design.
Yeah, I mean, we don't, I guess once in a while we might take a very small element of something that we really liked and reuse it. But yeah, we're creating all this stuff fresh and new.
And then I guess, so you have, once it's all tested and ready to go, you then spend, I don't know how much of the time is spent on the PR around the infographic.
Oh, a lot, weeks and weeks, for sure.